Record and Coach John Barry. Everybody knows Coach Barry. But anyway, here's our agenda for today. We're going to, as usual, we're going to touch base with Asheebo, see what's going on in the Chatham News and Record newspaper that came out this morning or yesterday, depending on where you're at. I'm going to talk about swimming, track, wrestling. He's going to get into Athlete of the Week. Then Chatham Middle School basketball tournament. I'll touch on that because that actually started yesterday and the day before. And then we'll go into the power rankings, which is everybody's favorite. And we also have enough information to let folks know that the basketball conference tournaments start next week. So we're going to kick it off. Let me go and knock this agenda out. And we will start off, as usual. Well, I'm pointing the wrong way. There's Asheebo. There's Coach Barry. And we're going to start off and hand it off to.
Yeah, just starting off with the stories coming out in the paper this week. So this week, Jordan Matthews had a big night on Friday with the Hall of Fame members. They honored numerous Hall of Fame members that were inducted over the past few years. And the big story tonight was Reggie Kermit Carter, as you guys might know him, and Terrence Newby, former UNC basketball player. They got their jerseys retired at the game Friday against Bartlett Yancey, and it was totally a surprise to them. So congrats to those two, and hats off to the program, Coach West, in honoring their Hall of Fame members and those two in a really cool way that night. That was a really special night there. And they unveiled also the list of all the Hall of Fame members over there by Robert Siler's jersey, and then they also unveiled the two new jerseys they have added to the retirees. So once again, congrats to those two, and a really, really cool night there. And then also Jordan Matthews, they're adding a boys volleyball team. So that's stories or more information about that is in the paper. And we talked about that last week. They'll have their first game on March 5th against Hillside, and they'll be hosting that one. So big history being made there at Jordan Matthews. And they'll be led by the volleyball head coach, Johnny Austin, and the football assistant coach, Jordan Menes. And yeah, they'll be playing with the North Carolina Boys High School Volleyball Association, which is now expanded to about over 80 teams across the state. And then yeah, we have a regular roundup from last week, and of course we're going to highlight our state champions here in a second. And then we have our regular athlete of the week, and we'll talk about that. So starting with the roundup and just some of the scores from last week. First, I want to highlight our state champions. And first starting with swimming and diving and indoor diving. And starting with there, Northwood Junior Abby Emmerich. She took home 2 state titles, one for the girls 200-yard freestyle and one for the girls 100-yard backstroke. And she now has 3 state titles in her career after winning the 3A girls 200-yard freestyle last year. And then Seaford got one with Sydney Burley. She won her school's first state championship in the girls sport by winning the girls 100-yard butterfly with a time of 57.42 seconds. And then over in track, we had some more state champions. C4 Junior Will Quickie, he won the state title for the boys 1,000-meter run for the second year in a row with a time of 2 minutes and 36 seconds. And his teammate, Junior Jack Anstrom, got his second state title of the year. He won one in cross country and now won an indoor track with the 3,200-meter run, and he got that with a time of 9 minutes and 30 seconds. And then Northwood's Laney Bobo won the girls pole vault state championship, won a personal best vault of 10 feet 6 inches. So congrats to all of our state champions over the weekend. And also Will Quickie, of course, he is our athlete of the week this week because he got his second straight state championship in the event this year. So hats off to all those athletes this weekend in our swimming and diving and indoor track events that had a great showing at the state championships. And then, Gene, you ready to go into the scores? So, yeah, start with scores from last week. And starting with wrestling, we had some wrestlers qualify for the state championships this weekend at the 2A Mid-East Regional Saturday. Seaforth won the 2A Mid-East Regional with a score of 231. And they had over 10 wrestlers qualify for states. It was Gabe Rogers in the 106-pound weight class, Jordan Miller for 113, Josh Miller for 120, Lane Armstrong for 126, Maddox Cody for 132, Caden Brewer for 144, William Bass for 150, Alex Cinchman for 165, Judge Lloyd for 175, Harrison Compton for 190, and Ethan Kubal for 215. And we can't forget Kira Rosenmarkel will also be competing in the girls' individual state championships in the 152 weight class after winning her regional last week. And then Northwood and Jordan Matthews each will be sending a wrestler to the state championships this weekend. Northwood's going to be sending Elijah Farrow in the 165-pound weight class, and Jordan Matthews will be sending Jakari Blue in the 190-pound weight class. So congrats to those wrestlers for making the individual state championships, and we'll see if we'll get some more individual state champions this weekend.
Hey, Asheebo, I got a question on that. I saw North Carolina High School Athletic Association has put out information about the tournament for the state tournament, and I guess we got 10, 11, 12 folks from Chatham County going. Congratulations to Seaforth. Do we have specific time? Because when I looked at it, it all depends on how well they do, and it starts off in the morning. And I think the championship round, where it's the top guy against the top two wrestlers go after 4 o'clock. Have you got any more information as to what the schedule looks like for Saturday?
For Saturday, all I know is that 4 o'clock they're starting the championships. I don't know how they're doing it by classification. I'm not sure if they're going to do it all at one time, because I think they're going to have multiple mats, of course. So I have to look for more information on that.
Yeah, I figure we can reach out to Coach Amy and Coach Vern and find out from them and over at JM as well. So anyway, folks, wrestling's been very good for Chatham County this year. So let me quit interrupting Asheebo and let's move on to the next topic.
All right, yeah. So now we can move into our basketball discussion. I know Coach Barry's excited for this one. So just running from scores from last night in the big night in Chatham County. We had 2 Chatham County matchups, and then of course Chatham Charter and Woods Charter also played some more conference games. But starting with Northwood and Chatham Central, top 2 teams in the conference. Northwood got the best of the Bears, and that won 69-48. And Seaforth, the boys beat Jordan Matthews 66-57. And Chatham Charter, they beat River Mill 59-39, and Woods Charter won a close one over Clever Garden School 54-52. And shout out to Woods Charter. They've been really turning around this season. They've now got 11 wins, much better than last year's 3-win season. So and they're also looking to be in the playoffs this year, which is a really good jump from last year. And on the girls' side, Northwood, they beat Chatham Central 73-38. Seaforth beat Jordan Matthews 63-8. Chatham Charter got the forfeit win over River Mill, and Woods Charter lost to Clever Garden School 55-21. And then just going into boys basketball scores from last week now into the power rankings. So Northwood last week they beat Graham on the 6, 100-49, and then they beat Cummings on Friday 72-18. And then Seaforth, they split the week, beating Northwood 83-61 and lost to Southeast Alamance 76-65 on Friday. And then Chatham Central, they beat Cummings 71-58 on the 6th. And then the Bears beat Western Hornets 53-39 on Thursday. And then finished the week beating Jordan Matthews 63-50 on Monday. And then Jordan Matthews, they made up for that loss with a 52-44 win over Bartlett Yancey Friday on Hall of Fame night. And Chatham Charter, they won a 6th straight game with a 72-51 win over Clever Garden School. But it was that streak was broken on Friday with a loss to Southern Wake Academy 62-50. And then Woods Charter, they beat Ascend Leadership 59-32. Triangle Math and Science 62-38. But finished the week with a loss to Carolina Friends 47-43. And then just want to talk about Jordan Matthews as well, because they finished their game against Cummings, and they won that one in overtime, I think by a score of 69-67. Just want to be sure that was the right score.
There's no fights or anything broke out.
Yes, 69-67. Yeah, no fights in that one. That one was finished without fans, but that was a big win for Jordan Matthews. And unfortunately, after that one, they lost Brennan Oldham. He had to get surgery again for that arm injury. We're not sure when he'll be back, but that was a big win for Jordan Matthews to get that one, because they were down to start the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. But yeah, going into power rankings for this week in boys basketball. And number one, of course, we got Northwood. Number two is still going to be Chatham Central. Number three, Jordan Matthews. Number four, Chatham Charter. Number five, Seaforth. And six, Woods Charter. Now, of course, Barry, I know after what we know about Jordan Matthews, they're losing Brennan Oldham for some time, which is a really crucial time here at the end of the season as they're trying to still get into the playoffs. It might look different as of now, especially after yesterday. So, but judging off of just last week, what do you think about this week's power rankings?
I think you have to factor in the fact that Brennan Oldham is hurt. That team is definitely going to be different. They lost their anchor. They lost the main engine that makes that team run. And just to start this whole thing off, when they played Seaforth last night, this was, I believe, one of the first games they played without him, and they lost the game. And essentially, it looked as if they were up comfortably 10, 15 points the entire game. So you would have to factor in, okay, that's a big loss for them. And I think it's potentially, I'm not going to say a death blow, but it's going to be a major obstacle for that team to overcome to, fill in or account for what's the hole that was created by Brennan Oldham being out of the game. That being said, I think if you factor that in, I would probably drop them below Seaforth. I would put them right above Woods Charter at this point, just because they lost their main guy, and it's going to be very, very tough, for them to compete against some of these other teams. Because if you look at, the success that they've had, he was a huge part of it. And if you take that piece out of the picture, it's going to be very, very difficult for Jordan Matthews to overcome this, especially this deep into the season. One thing that I'll also bring up is this. Jordan Matthews, they're going to be slotted in at that 4-5 spot, in the conference tournament. And they're going to have to play either Cummings or Southeast Alamance. And to play any one of those teams without him, again, it's going to be very, very difficult for them, to overcome that. So I agree with everything you had to say, except for what Jordan Matthews is currently placed, simply because Brennan Oldham is no longer going to participate throughout the season. His arm was in a sling yesterday. He said, I spoke to him very, very briefly as he was coming in. He said, pretty much, I'm done. And I was like, man, I'm sorry to hear that, buddy. Gave him a hug, and we just kind of kept it moving.
Yeah, and I watched the C4 game against Jordan Matthews last night online, and I could tell, like, it's just they're a much different team without running down low, because C4, they saw that early. I think already knowing that he wasn't going to be in the paint, they knew to attack, and that really opened up the rest of the offense there. And like you said, they just really controlled that game from pretty much from start to finish, up 10, up 15. Even when Jordan Matthews tried to cut back, it just wasn't enough there. But I hate that is a big blow for Jordan Matthews, because they're right on the cusp of making the playoffs. If you look at the RPI, they're sitting at 33, just right outside that 32 spot. And going into this conference tournament, like you said, it's just really going to be hard to beat teams like Seaforth, Cummings, Southeast Alamance in the first and second rounds to really make a push to get over that hump there. So, and looking at Seaforth at the 35 spot, they're also on the cusp. And I think if they can pick up some momentum in this tournament, beat a team like a Southeast Alamance or a Cummings, they might give themselves a better chance at the playoff picture. But really, I think the conference is going to come down to the two that played last night, Northwood and Chatham Central. But in that one, Northwood kind of, and I was watching that one too, Northwood kind of, played them kind of straight up, it seemed like, if you guys were watching that one. And it wasn't like last time, where Chatham Central went in, it wasn't like they were just going to completely slow the game down. It was at Northwood. So Northwood got after them, defensively. They didn't really do too much with Reed. It looked like they did put Drake on them and switch them off, sometimes, and didn't really, kind of emphasize too much on Reed. They kind of let the other players also try to beat them. But yeah, Northwood, I think proved last night, as far as the conference, there's just no one. Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of quick points. First point I want to make is about Seaforth. I think Seafort's fate right now is going to come down to what they do in the tournament. Right now, in their last game is against Bartlett Yancey. That's one of the teams that's not going to make the state playoffs. So beating them is not going to really, help them per se, particularly with their ranking and the ratings and what have you. It's going to come down to that game on Monday where they're going to play either Cummings or they're going to play Southeast Alamance. If they are able to overcome and win that game away in the state tournament, that's going to go a long way towards them making a state tournament. And if they can win that game and then end up playing that second game, which is most likely going to be Chatham Central, and they can somehow overcome and win that game, then it's a lock for them to make the state playoffs. But, listen, they're going to have to get themselves together, figure some things out, play together as a unit, all hands on deck sort of thing, to see if they can come and pull this off to go ahead and give them a bid in the state playoffs. But even with all of that being said, which I think is a great thing for the team to do, it's likely that they're going to have to end up playing one of those top 4 seeds, which includes Farmville Central, Northwood, and there's a few of those other teams there as well. So the bottom line is, if they can just get to that point, I think it would be a fantastic accomplishment for this team, just given some of the challenges that they had to overcome thus far. I think they can pull it off if they just band together, work together as a unit, and give it everything they have. Number 2, I was at and commentated the game last night with Northwood versus Chatham Central. And here's the story of the game. I think, number 1, I'm going to give props to Chatham Central. I thought Chatham Central did an exemplary job at playing Northwood. They gave it everything they had. They fought. They had resiliency. They was going blow for blow. And for the most part, no one in the conference has played Northwood that close for the entire game as Chatham Central had. And for that, I congratulate Chatham Central. And the one thing in particular that I'm most impressed with Chatham Central is the fact that they are a 1A team. They have a very small draw of kids to pull from. And for these guys, this team, coached by Coach Burke, to compete predominantly with 2A and also 3A teams. So remember, Northwood was 3A last year, to compete with them throughout the entire year. It's going to bode really, really well for these guys in the state playoffs. I expect big things out of Chatham Central once the state playoffs happen. God willing, hopefully, they get a good seed, they get some good matchups, and they can take this thing as far as they can go. The last thing I'll point out here is this. Northwood does a great job at smothering whoever your top option is in offense. They try to smother it. And whoever your weakest link is on defense, they try to attack it. So what they basically did was they had a fresh body. Most of the time it was Drake Powell on Reed Albright, which essentially limited his activity offensively. And they were forcing other people like Aiden Johnson, Luke Gaines, and Devontae Johnson to pick up the slack that normally Reed Albright would have. And ultimately, that probably was the difference. If you go and look at the box score, I don't believe Reed Albright had a ton of points in this particular game. Think about this. If he has his normal amount of points, this game is a 1-2 point game going into the final minutes of this game. But again, Coach Brown and Northwood, led by the great Drake Powell, they did what they had to do. One other point I want to make is this. Jake Layton had a fantastic game. He was letting things go from long range. Bang! He was just hitting everything he put up. I know at halftime he had 5 threes. He had a spectacular game. And you know what? If Jake Layton can continue that type of play from now throughout the state playoffs, Northwood is going to be a very interesting team. Because if you look at Northwood, they're going to compete with everyone. The issue comes in when these other teams have 2 or 3 people equivalent to Drake Powell. When that happens, I'm talking about Northwood now, we still can play with these teams, but it's going to be important for other guys to level up their game and play exactly at that level of a Drake Powell or these other players that they're going up against. So when they get the open looks, make it. When it comes time to play defense, play it. Get rebounds, advance the ball, limit the turnovers. And if other people can step up, like the Jake Laytons, the Fred Whitaker, and by the way, he had a great game as well. The Cam Fowlers, the Chad Graves, the Bo Harveys of the world. Bring Isaiah Blair in it. If these guys, we can get 2 more guys in addition to what Drake Powell is bringing to the table, Northwood is a legitimate, I would almost say favorite threat, to win the entire thing. But it's solely dependent on if other players from Northwood can maintain that level of play, even though they're facing some stiff competition on the other side.
Hey, Coach, I got a question. What's your take on Chad Graves? I mean, he got some buckets in there. I think he also went for a dunk that kind of bounced out and didn't go in. But like you said, they have to, and Latham, you're right. He had 5 threes by halftime, and he seemed to be in that zone yesterday. Again, what's your take on Chad?
Well, first off, Chad Graves, I think he has all of the measurables. He's tall, he's physical. One of his biggest attributes is he has that dog, he has that monster in him where he wants to get out there and be physical. He wants to play big boy ball. Love that about him. The biggest thing that I would suggest to Chad Graves is this. If he can just become just a little bit more polished, a little bit more careful with hand on the ball, making those layups, not necessarily being a little bit more finesse on defense. Don't be just go out there knocking people over and just letting guys run into you. I'm telling you, he can step up to that next level, and he can be that guy, that all-world 5 that we all know he can be. So I think, to answer your question, Gene, the biggest thing with Chad Graves is this. I think he just needs a little bit more polish, a little bit more smoother, just be a little bit more careful. And I think if he does that, I think that would take him to that next level.
All right, and I got a question for Asheebo. You were watching the game yesterday. I think somewhere in the third quarter, they got to within 10 points, and you've seen most of Northwood's game. So what's your feeling? And do you kind of agree with Coach Berry that Chatham Central, even though they're a 1A school, is probably the one of the toughest competitors in that conference, and will be a tough competitor once state tournament time comes around?
I think all year they've been definitively the number 2 team in that conference, and that's with 2A teams. Pretty good teams that we've seen like Southeast Alamance. They've been in those dogfights with Seaforth and won both of them. So I think they've proven that. The classification, the fact that they're a small school, it doesn't matter this year. And they played Northwood. Now we've seen the closest out of anybody in this conference. I watching last night. I mean, it was back and forth in that first half. Like, Reed Auburn. It wasn't just Reed. It was also Luke Gaines hitting threes. Like they were playing with Northwood, playing getting out of Northwood's press even on some possessions and getting down and getting buckets. So, and I think this whole season just will really, really help them in the 1A state tournament too. Like kind of like we talked about with Northwood. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think they'll do really well in the state tournament too, is because they played the best of the best pretty much all year until, of course, conference play. But, Chatham Central was seeing 2A teams every night, winning those games, winning the close games. And then, you're looking at the RPI, they're only a 6 seed because they're in that conference. They're not going to be the winners of their conference. They're just winners of the 1A side. So I feel like that's a pretty good draw for them if they can get the 5-6 seed in the state tournament, because they're going to be playing teams at the 1A level that weren't, not the best teams, but then, by regionals and the quarterfinals, they'll see those better 1A teams, and I think they'll be really ready for them by that time.
Well, this goes back to what both you and Coach Berry have been talking around for the last several weeks, that there's a big benefit to being able to play the tougher teams. And I think that's one of the things that hurt Seaforth last year. When Jaron was on the team, they didn't play some of those tougher teams. Any more thoughts on that?
I think it really just gives the players more confidence as well too. I mean, you going in these games against Northwood, especially for guys like Aiden Johnson, Devontae Johnson, outside of Reed, you're going up against guys like Cam Fowler, Drake Powell, Chad Graves down low. And I mean, if you see you guys are making this a game, I mean, I feel like in the back of the head, they probably feel like they can play with anybody, not just in the conference, but down there in 1A as well. So I think it is a confidence thing with this team. And the fact is that's such a big thing is this team is still also pretty young on this side. They don't have too many seniors, that's starting. Like Reed still a junior. I'm pretty sure Aiden Johnson is also a junior as well. Their core is still going to be back next year. So I think this is just a breakout year for them that could be really successful. But the big thing is they can also get even better for next year.
Yeah, I think the big thing is this. I think playing up is a wonderful thing as long as you don't get trounced on. If you get trounced on, then it can have a negative impact on you and your confidence in the team and the chemistry and how they perform. But if you can somehow play against higher teams or upper level teams and you can compete, and especially if you can win, it's going to go really, really well for your confidence. And I think this is exactly what's happened with the Chatham Central Bears. In fact, at the end of the game last night, I actually went inside of Chatham Central's locker room and I basically shook the coach's hand, dapped him up, and told him, listen, man, I think everybody's proud of the fact of how you guys competed and, gave their Northwood everything you had. And, although you didn't win the regular season conference championship, you should just hold your head up high as well as the remaining players. And when I said that to Coach Burke, he came back and said, Coach Barry, listen, I appreciate that, brother, man. But the big thing that we're focused on right now is the state playoffs. He said, that's what I'm really concerned with. And he was basically saying by playing these teams like Northwood and Southeast Alamance and all these other upper echelon type teams, he said, this is what's preparing us, and this is what's going to give us the best chance to go deep and hopefully have an opportunity to compete for a state championship. And I understood exactly where he's coming from, and that's exactly what Gene just now said, and I completely agree with that, Gene.
Yes, I think what we'll see is over the next few weeks, once we get into state championships and when people are listening to us here on the Sports Roundup, that I think that's going to hold true. A couple of things I want to finish up on the Northwood Chatham Central game. I do want to say, and I did put up a video of this on YouTube, and we'll put a link to it below. Griffin Hobbs was introduced as one of the starters, and as folks know, Griffin was involved in the car accident. The seniors were announced as starters. Griffin did get onto the court. He stood there, was in the first play for the tip off, and then had to sit out for of course health reasons. So that was nice to see. There was also play for Karen Knight. Karen Heilman, who was a school teacher, passed away from cancer, and also coach. A lot of people know Karen from both her coaching and teaching participation. So that was a nice thing. And the interesting thing is Coach Albright, the Lady Bears coach, came up to me, and I did a quick little segment because the Bears don't have pink uniforms, but they did wear a color. She told me the color that they were wearing was representative of ovarian cancer. So even though the girls, the Chatham Central girls team was not wearing pink, they were still mindful of the folks who have fought cancer and the ones that have won that battle and lost that battle. So that's my wrap up on the Northwood Chatham Central game. You gentlemen want to continue with the boys?
Yeah, I'm gonna make one quick comment on the Griffin Hobbs situation. When I first walked in, I saw Mr. Hobbs, which is Griffin's dad, and he said, Coach, they're telling me that they're going to do a little special tribute to my son. They talking about starting him, and this time, instead of allowing the other team to win the tip, this time Drake is going to jump the tip, win the tip it to Griffin Hobbs. And as soon as he's dribbled a couple times, then they're going to call timeout. Then they're going to give him a standing ovation, just as a show of gratitude and appreciation and love that we as the community want to show back to the Griffin Hobbs and his entire family. And that's exactly what happened. The timeout was called. All the players came over. They dapped him up. They hugged him. And every coach and every player on the bench gave Griffin Hobbs that fatherly, motherly, family hug that ingratiated him and made him feel so special. And I thought that was just a very, very classy act on the part of Coach Matt Brown and the entire coaching staff, as well as I'll say Cameron Vernon for thinking that through and giving Griffin Hobbs his flowers because he definitely deserved it. He's been there from day one. And you know what? We just letting Griffin Hobbs know that, listen, even though you may not be playing, we got you. And we're going to always look out for you. So hats off to Griffin Hobbs.
All right. And actually, I do have one last thing. It was senior night last night at Northwood. It was also senior night at Seaford, but we do have pictures and I do have videos, but I need to get those up either later today or tomorrow. So, folks, we will have pictures from the senior, both the girls, the boys, as well as the cheerleaders. It was during the between the games when they had the presentation. So we will have that up in the next couple of days. All right, gentlemen, back to basketball.
Yeah, you ready to get into the girls, Coach Barry?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, starting with girls basketball scores from last night, we had Northwood beating Chatham Central 73-38, and then Seaford beat Jordan Matthews in a big fashion, and then Chatham Charter also got the forfeit win over River Mill, and Clever Garden School got the best of Woods Charter last night, 55-21. And then scores from last week, we had Seaford. They beat Northmore 59-8 and Bartlett Yancey 56-19 and Southeast Alamance 54-39 during the week. And then Northwood, they beat Graham on the 6th 58-17 and Cummings on Friday 57-17. And then Chatham Central, they won all three of their games during the week, beating Jordan Matthews 63-40 on Monday, Cummings 56-34, and Western Harnett 56-33. And Jordan Matthews, they lost their only game of the week to Bartlett Yancey on Friday, 67-47. And Chatham Charter, they're continuing, their dominant run through the regular season, beating Clever Garden School 56-35. And then they beat Southern Wake Academy 77-6 on Friday. And then Woods Charter, they beat Ascend Leadership 39-25 on the 6th, but they lost to Triangle Math and Science 67-29 on Friday. So girls power rankings from last week. Starting at 1, of course, we got Seaford, and 2, Northwood. Number 3, I still got Chatham Charter. 4, Chatham Central. 5, Jordan Matthews, and 6, Woods Charter. Once again, not many changes to the girls power rankings. We pretty much seen where the girls stand this season. It's been pretty consistent across the board from what we've seen, especially Seaford, who's just, it seems like they're just playing really consistently, really good basketball down the stretch, heading into the conference tournaments. Not really, outside after the Northwood game, it just knowing that that's their biggest competitor in the conference, along with Southeast Alamance. It just seems like they never lose focus, outside of those games and with who they're playing. So, Coach Barry, what you think of the girls' power rankings, and what are you hoping to see out of the girls' basketball season as we get the regular season to a close here?
Well, first of all, I completely agree with the power rankings in the order that you stated. That being said, I think that as we go into the conference tournament next week, those top 3 teams, Seaforth, Northwood, and Southeast Alamance, I believe that any one of those teams can beat the other team. The talent is very close in terms of like being equal. It's just going to come down to execution. Who executes better? Who sticks to their principles? Who stays focused? Who removes any distractions if they do, come around? The good thing about those 3 as well is we know in the state playoffs, they all going to be very, very representative. And I think they'll probably all win at least that first game, and then it's going to get to the second and the third and the fourth. The biggest thing for let's just talk about Seaford first is to stay focused, is to not let any distractions interfere, stick with their principles, and God willing, things work out and they can push this thing as far as they can go. Same thing with Northwood. Like I said, I like Northwood's girls because they have that grit, they have that toughness. They have like 2 or 3 girls on that team that's still there that played on that championship team 3 years ago. So they have that medal. And on any given day, especially given that the conference tournament is played at Northwood, they definitely can beat you. And then obviously you have Southeast Alamance. listen, they have that grit as well, that dog, and they actually believe they're supposed to beat anybody that you put in front of them. But getting back to your point, Asheebo, I think here's the bottom line. I think next week it's likely that Seaford's going to win their first game. It's likely that Northwood and Southeast Alabama is going to win their first game. That second game, which is the semifinal game, is going to be probably Northwood and Southeast Alamance. Whoever wins that game obviously going to go to the final, and then you're going to have Seaforth, which is going to probably end up playing either Chatham, I want to say Chatham Central, maybe Bartlett Yancey. Again, you can't really, count your chickens before they hatch. Obviously, Chatham Central or Bartlett Yancey on any given day they can win. But if you look at it, it's probably it's a high probability that if Seaford does what they're supposed to do, they should be favored to win that game. So at the end of the day, you can very well end up in a championship game where you have Seaford versus one of those other two teams. And that game is going to be ruckus, especially if it's Northwood, because I'm telling you, Northwood is very, very dangerous in that gym. Home court advantage, have the crowd. Obviously, Seafords will be there as well, but they're going to be playing on a big high. And as we always say, it's very, very tough to beat a team 3 times in the same season, especially if that game is in their particular gym. So no, I don't think anything is a foregone conclusion whatsoever when it comes to that conference tournament. I think anything can happen. Any one of those 3 teams can win. So just stay tuned, folks. In Chatham County, you got to come to the Northwood High School next week. I believe it's Wednesday, which is going to be that semifinal game. Come check it out. And ultimately, the final is going to be on that Friday. It should be some action-packed basketball in Chatham County at its best.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to add to that, I forgot to mention this earlier. This week, also middle school basketball tournament going on here in Chatham County. They're playing at Margaret Pollard School. Girls are playing tonight. Boys are playing tomorrow. And then the championship for both the girls and boys for middle school basketball is taking place at Seaforth. So today and tomorrow, it's at Pollard. First game that starts at 5. And then on Friday, the games are at Seaforth, the championship games for the boys and girls. And I think those will start at 5. The girls will start at 5. And boys are slated to start, I think, 6:15. So just want to remind folks that we've been talking to high school, but there's also middle school stuff going on this week.
Yeah, because Barry, I totally agree with you. I think the conference for girls side comes down to those 3 teams, and then I think Seaford has established itself as, I think we can safely say is the team they're going to be in the conference championship. I think the conference goes through them. But yeah, like you say, it's hard to beat a team 3 times, and that's the case for Southeast. For them, that's the case for Southeast Alamance and Northwood, and with Northwood especially. The fact that it's a rivalry, the fact that the girls are really familiar with each other, the programs are really familiar with each other, and I mean we've seen in those 2 games, Northwood played with them for a significant amount of time during those games. Of course, Seaford just pulled away second half, fourth quarter, but especially that first time at Northwood, I mean Northwood was controlling that game, and if they can put that together, for a full 4 quarters, that's going to be really interesting to see how Seaford can handle that in a late game situation. To win against a team that's really, really playing hard to beat you and as a team at the top. And I think, for Seaford, we look at their schedule, and outside of Northwood and Southeast and the non-conference schedule, of course, we haven't really seen them, challenge too much in the conference. But I think that'll be a really good thing for Seaford if they can see a game like that where it comes down to the last few possessions, the last quarter, where they have to make plays and win going into the state tournament, because we know in the 2A state tournament, there's a couple teams that's going to give Seaforth a fight like that.
Well, let me make a couple of statements here. I think the style of play of Seaforth is one of those kind of styles where it just wears on you. It grinds you. And over the course of the game, it just starts to unfold. Versus if you look at other teams that's like to press and jump on you and overwhelm you, if that team can't handle it, they can put together or put the game away very, very quickly because of the style of play. But if you sit back and play a more, what I would consider patient, sound basketball, even with some of the bad teams, you're not going to necessarily put them away in the first 2, 3, 4 minutes. But over the course of the game, it starts slipping away. So if you look at all of the games that Seaford plays, they all start off like this. Bartlett Yancey started that way, and they ended up losing by 50. Right? You look at Northmore, it started off that way, but just by being fundamental and technical, they end up leaving and going past. The other issue I want to bring up is this, and this is the thing that people got to be careful with Seaforth. People say, well, wait a minute, they're 21-2. They haven't played anybody. They just running everybody out the gym. Let me throw some names out at you. Grace Christian Academy, the #1 rated team in the country. Yeah, we lost by 20 plus on that early in the season. There was some boo-boos. I'm sure Seaforth would love to get that game back. Then came back and played Chapel Hill High School, a 4A team, beat them. Came back, went to Cherokee, played 3 6A teams. Should have won all 3 of those games. 1-2, lost 1. The one that was lost was in overtime. I believe it was 33-30 or 36-33. Very well could have won. Missed 2 layups and some free throws. Make those, that we the one, that Seaforth won those games. Then came back, played Roseville, which is another high-level team. Look at their rankings. Beat that team convincingly, 15, 20 points. Then came back in the conference and played Northwood, beat those guys twice, also beat Southeast Alamance. So they've played at least 6, 7, 8 teams that's all going to be in the state plus with a very high rating. The other thing that's interesting about Seaforth is this. All of those teams, they all basically play the same way. So now what you have is a situation where when Seaford plays them, this is just another one of those teams that we've been playing or that they've been playing the whole time. So it's nothing new. When people got to play us, we have a whole different flair, a whole different way at which we go about playing, which is a little bit different than maybe the other teams. So now when you got to prepare for Seaforth, you got 1 day, 2 days of practice to try to figure out how to deal with the type of thing that they're actually doing to you. And that's one of the biggest advantages that I think Seaford has. They played a bunch of teams, and on top of that, a bunch of teams similar to the team that we have to play. And on top of that, the style that we have is a little bit different than most people's.
Yeah, no doubt. They played the tough schedule, like I said, outside their conference, and I mean, and even in the conference, they had Northwood, like you said, and Southeast Alamance. And I just when I think about teams that have played good teams that they played in the conference, I just feel like to beat Seaforth, you really have to bring your A game defensively too, because we know Seaforth is going to defend. They're going to make it really hard for you to score. Talking to Coach Bird, that's like the biggest thing he harps with his team. And I think it's just, but I think when I look at Seaforth, and to say just defend them is so much easier said than done, right? Because it's not just Gabby White. You got Katie Leonard, who can also handle the ball and create her own shot. You have shooters on the wings and Peyton Collins and Mia Moore. And then you have Hannah Ajayi, who can also, is kind of like a two-way, right? She can also defend, but also attack the basket and get her own shot as well. Sydney Ballard down low with the boards. It's just, I look at their team, especially that starting 5, and it's just too much offense and too much defense. I think for some teams to, like you said, to play with for the full 4 quarters. The style, they like to attack, they like to get down low, and they can also hit you from outside. It's just, like you said, it just wears you down.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think all the teams together make a great conference, and when they all play up against each other, it makes for a great entertaining game. And I look forward to the remaining games in the conference as well as the state, and let's see how far this goes. And remember, this is a Seaford team where everybody are returning players. They were runner-up in the state championship game last year at the Dean Dome. This is the team that you're dealing with. Yep. So these guys are no scrubs at all, and they've starting to gain some significant experience. So they are definitely a team to be reckoned with, coached by Coach Bird.
Yeah.
All right, let's get ready to wrap this up, gentlemen. Where y'all going to be over the next 7 days? Because next week we've got conference tournaments going on next week. But Asheebo, you want to start off?
Yeah, well, Saturday should we have some C4 wrestlers make the finals in the individual state championship? I will be at Greensboro around 4:00, and then I will be there Monday for the first night of some Chatham County conference tournament basketball action as well. So getting those, and then we'll see from there. Like you said, what happens with the tournaments and where I'll be at next. So stay tuned.
Yeah, before Coach Barry starts up, Asheebo and I talked about this before we started. We don't have a schedule, and we don't know who's going to be playing anyone yet. But as soon as we find out, follow Asheebo on Twitter, Asheebo R38 at Twitter. I got that right, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah, and he will have that information out. We'll have that information out as well. Sorry for interrupting, Coach Barry. Where are you going to be over the next 7 days?
Friday, I'm going to be at the Seaford Bartlett Yancey game. On Saturday, assuming Chatham County sends some wrestlers out to the finals with the wrestling tournament, I'm going to be in Greensboro. Monday, I'll definitely be at Seaforth and or Northwood. Probably both of them, because I anticipate the girls playing on Monday, probably against Northmore, and I assume that Northwood is going to probably play somebody like a Northmore as well, or Graham, and the girls will probably be playing there as well. And then from there, all the games are going to be at Northwood. I'll be at every single game, at Northwood go next week. I'm just a basketball junkie. I love to watch. I love to see. I like to see what people are doing. I like to feel the energy. What's better than watching basketball and coaching basketball here in Chatham County? I'm all over it like a cheap suit.
Right. And folks, if you missed the game yesterday in Northwood, I did put that up on YouTube. You can find it with Coach Barry commentating. I'm not going to be around on Saturday. I've got to be out of town, so I'm not doing anything on Saturday. But next week, yes, I have not, since we don't know the schedules yet, I don't know which games I'll be shooting at. But if there's a game that I'm shooting at that Coach Barry's at as well, we'll have video. You'll hear him talking. So, folks, anything else, Asheebo and Coach Barry, before we sign off?
No, sir.
All right. Hey, folks, thank you for watching. We appreciate it. We've got a steady crowd that checks in with us every week. Just let your family and friends know about it. And we're getting into that prime basketball portion of the season where it's tournament time next week. And then we're talking state tournaments afterwards. And this is the place with these two guys. See, I'm doing this again. With these two guys that cover Chatham County sports and get into the minutia. That's the word of the day, minutia. All right, folks, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.